Hello, and thank you very much for joining us for this discussion. US President Donald Trump has intensified his criticism of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, calling him a dictator without elections. He also accused him of exploiting US military aid to keep the war with Russia going for personal benefit. On his social media platform, Trump criticized Zelenskyy for dragging the US into a futile conflict and suggested that Zelenskyy wants to maintain the flow of American funds. Trump also asserted that only he could bring an end to the war, contrasting his potential solutions with the failures of President Biden and European leaders. In response, Zelenskyy highlighted that holding elections during wartime is not feasible, calling Trump's remarks harmful. He reiterated that Russian President Putin is untrustworthy and stressed the need for strong security guarantees in any peace talks. European leaders, including German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, condemned Trump's statements, reinforcing Zelenskyy's legitimacy and Ukraine's elected leader. With the war nearing its third year, there is still no clear resolution in sight. We are here in a discussion. We are joined by some guests today. Professor Alexei Haran, Professor of Comparative Politics at the University of Kiev-Mohyla, located in Kiev, Ukraine. We're also joined by Adrian Calomel, terrorism scholar and fellow at Abrian Peninsula Institute, located in New York. We're also joined by Daniel Wagner, CEO of Country Risk Solution, located in Portland. And we're also joined by Andrea Lucidi, war reporter located in Moscow. Thank you very much for joining us. Professor Alexei Haran, I wanted to come to you first. Obviously, these statements are a huge contrast to the former biggest supporter of Ukraine, the United States. Donald Trump has called President Zelenskyy a dictator. He cites him not having an election, which has been legally postponed since the start of the conflict. Professor Haran, what do you think of these Trump statements?
Well, first of all, I would say that, this is a very dangerous development. We see this approach of Trump administration when he buys, Russian propaganda for some reason. I don't know why, because it contradicts to all the facts. I mean, not only the issue of elections, but also who is aggressor, who is the victim, who attacked whom. Everything he said is actually doesn't correspond to the facts. This is very, very strange. We expected some changes in the policy, but not so dramatic. One thing is actually that we know that Trump is changing his mind, so we hope that maybe in, say, sometime in 2 months, when he will develop negotiations with Putin, he will see what real Russian position is, and he will change his mind. That's the hope. But so far, definitely, we are very, very disturbed, because it looks like, two great powers may divide the world or may divide the continent at the expense of smaller country, which is Ukraine, and which is totally unacceptable, not only for us, but also, I believe, for the world. And if Trump will look as loser in this situation, as a weak guy, then it would create very, very bad precedent for China, for North Korea, for Iran, who may follow this aggressive Russian approach. So it would be the danger for the whole world. Now, regarding the issue of elections, it's very strange here, because we know that Putin actually is president, the leader of Russia, since 2000. And during this time, we changed 5 presidents. Okay, Zelenskyy is legitimate president. We cannot hold elections during the war. This is understandable. The whole country is bombarded. We cannot conduct elections in this situation. We are actually interested to have new elections, but to do that, first of all, we need to have a very stable ceasefire, and we need security guarantees that Russia will not start its aggression again. Because imagine the situation, okay? We have a ceasefire. We remove the martial law. We are starting to demobilize the army. We are conducting elections. And next day, Russia attacks us again. Can you exclude it? Russia did it several times since 2014. So what we need a just peace, and definitely we need security elections. And we remain democratic country. I can criticize my president.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm doing
Yes.
it every day, and we are interested to conduct real democratic elections, but not under the threat of attack or aggression.
Professor Haran, I just want to quickly ask you, what is the feeling towards President Zelensky in Ukraine?
Well, it's interesting that we are criticizing him, because we are a democratic country. But if we are talking about politicians, his popularity is still number one. If we are talking in general about potential candidates, so number one is General Zaluzhny, who is now a Ukrainian diplomat in the UK, but who didn't say that I will participate in the campaign. But if we are talking about politicians, then Zelensky is still number one. And actually, his level of trust and distrust is quite stable. So since May last year, so the trust to him is about 55%, and distrust is 35%, with positive balance of trust and distrust 20%. So this is huge for any president, and especially for the president, during the times of war. So it's really interesting, because again, we are criticizing him. We have this possibility, but at the same time, the level of trust remains very high. And one of the explanation is actually that Zelensky is not just politician Zelensky. So he's president of the country and commander-in-chief of the armed forces of the country which is at war. So Zelensky symbolizes resistance of the country, and this is part of the explanation why the trust to him remains high.
Yes. Thank you very much. Adrian Camembert, I wanted to come to you next. What are the implications of these Trump statements? How do you think we can see President Trump and Russia, this Russian relationship evolving? We obviously, during Trump's last presidency, we saw a kind of friendly relationship between Putin and Trump. How do you think we can see this developing? And do you think this will be to Ukraine's loss, would you say?
Well, thank you for having me. And these statements by Trump, I would say, are troubling. In the United States, we recognize there needs to be an end to this war. And wars are usually, the way they're ended is through someone suing for peace. And right now, it seems as though Trump is trying to make Zelensky sue for peace. The pressure is being put on Zelensky. I don't know if there's back messaging going on, but the public messaging is not helpful to get to a favorable outcome for the Ukraine. One where the territory that was taken in this most recent invasion is given back to the Ukrainians, and two, that Russia should be made to bear some of the cost of rebuilding the Ukraine. With Trump stating that if he had been president, this war wouldn't have happened. Yeah, I kind of agree with him on this because I do think Putin was looking directly at Afghanistan and then saw the Biden approach as he was amassing his troops along the border. And I don't think Putin would have, weakness invites invasions, and especially with a person like Putin. And so if Trump had been there with a more forward-leaning foreign policy, I do believe that this war could have been averted. We just have to look back. This has been going on for quite a while now, not just this this initial this version, but this has been Putin kind of baloney slicing up parts of the Ukraine for better part of a decade now.
Yes, Andrea Lucidi, obviously staying on these Trump statements. This is obviously a clear indication that Trump is willing to move and work closer with Russia. How do the people of Moscow view Donald Trump and his belief that President Zelenskyy, the previous U.S. ally, is a dictator?
Well, of course, in Russia, the population, the people are very critical. The most part of population are very critical about the American policy. I would like to remember that during the American campaign, the Belarusian president called as idiot Trump and Biden, both of them, because he said, I prefer a dictatorship and not democracy like in the US. So we need to understand that from the Russian perspective, the USA is always the USA. It's like a very far country, far from values, from political perspective and all. But in this situation now, the plan of Trump to move for a normalization of the relationship between Russia and the USA is, of course, good seen, because the Russian population is not desire a war. And a lot of them, a lot of mass media, a lot of journals are, since years, they are speaking about a possible open war between the West and Russia due to the Western policy and the Western politicians. Because in Europe and in the Biden administration, a lot of very high people that are working in very high positions say a lot of bad things against Russia, and someone of them make public declaration about the possibility of a war against Russia. And of course, peace, the possibility of a peace is well seen here. Yes. About the declaration of Trump that Zelenskyy is a dictator, this is the official position of Moscow, because the presidential time of Zelenskyy was ended in May, and without new elections, a lot of Russian politicians, all Russian politicians and the Russian governments are seeing Zelenskyy as a usurpator. Mm-hmm. Because the Ukrainian constitution don't tell anything about the possibility for the president of Ukraine to continue his mandate after the end of the time without any approval by the parliament or by the people. No official act was approved by the Ukrainian Rada about a new presidential mandate for Zelenskyy or a prolongation of his duty as a president. And this count for the Russian government as a proof of illegitimacy of Zelenskyy as a president of Ukraine.
Yes, Daniel Wagner, Trump has this kind of way of putting things out on Truth Social and kind of like saying things in a blasé kind of throws things out in press conferences. This matter of Ukraine and the Western world, who all support Ukraine, including the UK, including France, including Germany, can you see the way that Trump is handling this, driving a serious wedge between the US and the rest of the Western world?
You know, when Trump was a candidate, it was easy to ignore him, but unfortunately now we can't ignore him. He was selling crazy on the campaign trail, and now he's selling crazy on the world stage. it's like we're careening down a ravine without any brakes, and that ends in catastrophe. I don't know what to say about the latest crazy things coming out of his mouth, except that I think the intelligence agencies in the West must all need a diaper change at this point, because they were freaking out in Trump 1 when the Russian ambassador ended up in the Situation Room or the White House Oval Office. I think it was the White House Oval Office. Now, basically, Putin and Trump are aligned. And this has never happened before in American political history, and it shouldn't be happening now. It's like black is night and hot is cold. Everything is completely the opposite of what it should be and what it has been. Now, in answer to your question, I think it's very, very important for the European powers to maintain solidarity to the extent that they disagree with what Trump is doing. And of course, not every European leader does disagree with what he's doing. But solidarity is going to be extremely important right now. I think we're so far into uncharted territory that it's difficult to predict what is going to happen. And of course, with Trump, we never know what's going to be happening next. If this is merely a negotiating tactic on his part, and I doubt that it is, then basically time will sort of right the ship. But as I say, I don't think this is merely a negotiating tactic. Trump's approach is to double down on the latest crazy thing that he said. And he's unlikely to back down from this position that he's taken vis-a-vis Ukraine, with Zelenskyy as a dictator and Russia as the good guy and Ukraine as having brought this upon themselves. I don't know what else to say. We're in the theater of the absurd.
Adrian Calamel, Zelenskyy responded to Trump's accusations, what this dictator label that Trump has given him, and said that Trump has been influenced by Russian disinformation. Okay, do you think this is true? Do you think Trump is being influenced by this Russian disinformation, or do you think he has something else on his mind in regards to to the way he's going about these negotiations?
I'm hoping he has something else on his mind, but he has clearly been influenced by these operations. You see some of the people that he's surrounded by, and I'll just point out to the most obvious person, Tucker Carlson. He goes to Moscow. I've been to Moscow. I was there during the Soviet Union, and I understood what it was like. You only got to see what you were allowed to see. He is parroting the exact lines of Putin, and really the most bombastic talking points: one, that he's a dictator; two, that he brought this on himself, that he invited the invasion on himself. Trump, I just want to end with this on my thoughts here. Trump needs to understand that you can't deal with Russia without keeping in mind your negotiations and your dealings with Beijing and your dealings with Tehran and all the other countries that are aligned against you. Because Trump may not realize it, but Putin works closely with Xi Jinping and has a much better relationship with Ali Khamenei than he will ever have with Trump. Trump is being bamboozled as far as I can see, and he's bought into it, which is rather shameful.
Andrea Lucidia, could I get your response to that? And what are these, and your response to these allegations that Trump is kind of being hypnotized by Russian information in the way he's going about these negotiations?
Well, I think that the position of Donald Trump, it's not different now from the early position that he had during his campaign. During his campaign, we hear a lot of times about a peace agreement of Ukraine, about the not explosion of this war if he was president in 2022. So I think my point of view is that we can see a coherence in his position now. And sincerely, I think that accusation like Trump is working for Vladimir Putin or Donald Trump is Russian asset in the US are like conspiration theory, because really, I don't think that a personage like Donald Trump, ex-president of the US, can be called a Russian asset. It's completely crazy from my point of view. But of course, he represents a political position in the US and in the Republican political area from the people that are thinking that the support of supporting Ukraine with money and with weapons is not the main interest of the US in this moment. We can think that till now the US are spending billions, 100 billions for Ukraine, and that without this money and this military support, Ukraine cannot be able to continue the war anymore. And Trump is well informed about it, and also Zelenskyy. And today, Bloomberg published a reportage about the possibility that the Ukrainian leadership was lied to Donald Trump and to the US presidential administration about the real amount of rare and strategic minerals in the country. So this is very important, I think, regard about what happened with Donald Trump and his request of strategic minerals from Ukraine.
Daniel Wagner, during this whole thing, a US envoy actually arrived in Kiev amid these escalating tensions. What objectives does the US aim to achieve with the envoy's visit to Kiev, and how does it align with these statements from Donald Trump?
Seems pretty clear the objective is to apply maximum pressure on him at this particular moment. It would be really interesting to be a fly on the wall to hear the conversations about what's being discussed. I think that Zelenskyy ultimately may be forced into agreeing to the idea of ceding up to 50% of the remaining country's rare earth minerals to the US if he wants to get Trump on his side. And as we know, Trump is very transactional. So if he were to do that, he could potentially change the calculus. And if his choice is ultimately between being manhandled by Putin and Trump together with a no-win proposition versus caving in to what Trump is asking for, I would have thought he would choose, the latter. So let's see what happens.
Adrian Kammermel, Vladimir Putin has said nobody is excluding Ukraine from these talks in ending the war. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, that's a very interesting statement, because it's from the outside, it sure looks like they're being excluded. We have to remember Trump, with his statements, he said he's going to end this conflict day one. That's not going to happen, obviously. He said he was going to end the conflict in the Middle East day one. So what is he actually driving for? We really need to see how this eventually plays out and how it shapes up. I do think that it's still early days. He's been talking a lot with Putin, but he hasn't been talking a lot with Zelenskyy. There's been the public proclamations, and maybe that's just posturing to have Zelenskyy come begging. I don't know. But at the end of the day, you got to think that any type of deal has to involve Zelenskyy and the Ukrainians. This cannot be a repeat of the Doha deal that was signed in Qatar with the Taliban, who now control Afghanistan. And this was done under Trump without a single representative from the legitimate Afghan government.
Andrea Lucidi, what are your thoughts to finish this off? What are your thoughts that are going to happen in the future in regard to Donald Trump, in regard to Zelenskyy, in regard to Vladimir Putin and these ongoing peace talks in Saudi Arabia?
I think that if the situation will still the same, we will see very soon a meeting between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, and maybe with this meeting, official peace negotiation can be started, and maybe the war can be ended maybe in 2-3 months from now. But of course, the main thing is to see if the situation can still the same, because today the external special service of Russia make a declaration about a possible terroristic attack against Russia from Ukraine as a form of sabotage of this peace talking. Of course, this is only a declaration of the Russian external special service, but it's very important, in my point of view, that the situation still stable, because if some special or some hard can happen, like an attack against nuclear structure of Russia or something like this, the situation maybe can be changed.
Thank you very much for joining us. And that ends our conversation in regards to this discussion. Thank you very much, Professor Haran, for joining us. Thank you very much to Daniel Wagner, Adrian Kamamel, and thank you very much to Andrea Lucidi for joining us on this discussion. That is all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from across the world.